Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, and if this is your first time tuning into a touchdowns to home runs video, please do me a favor and do yourself a favor and subscribe. You would know that football is my favorite sport in the world. Football is the best sport in the world, in my opinion. There's nothing I love more than football. But yet, after watching this Last Chance U series, this Last Chance U basketball documentary, after watching all the football ones, because these Last Chance U documentaries have been my favorite Netflix show since they started at EMCC. They are amazing. I love football. I love getting into this. So when they came out that they're doing basketball instead of football, I was like, come on, man. Like, I love the football ones. Don't take that away from me. But I was like, you know what? I still like basketball. I'm going to give this a shot and see what we got. I have zero problem. I have 110% confidence in coming out here and saying that this Last Chance U season, the basketball one that we just watched with ELAC, the East Los Angeles Huskies, and Coach John Mosley, was the best season of Last Chance U that we have ever seen so far. I have zero problem in coming out here and saying that. And football is my favorite sport. I just felt like this documentary was so well done. The players, the coaches, the everything. And I'm going to get into my review. I'm going to give my total score for this documentary, Last Chance U. I'll compare it to some of the other seasons. I know this is a bit of a different video. It's still sports related, but we are reviewing a TV show that's been one of my favorite, if not my favorite TV show for a long time now. So I can't wait to get into it. Do me a favor right now. Like the video, comment anything about East Los Angeles or Last Chance U, anything if you've watched it before, because if you were tuning into this video, I'm guessing that you have watched the series. But I am going to be giving some spoilers in here, so if you haven't watched it, first of all, I highly recommend that you go watch the show. But there is going to be some spoilers in this video, so let's get into my review. Starting off with just talking about the season and what happened and everything. So first off, I want to talk about the head coach, John Mosley. Out of all the coaches that we have faced with Last Chance U, out of all the coaches that we've had, Buddy Stevens, Jason Brown, John Beam, and now John Mosley. John Mosley, I think, is my favorite coach out of all of them. I really liked his coaching style and just how he connected with the kids. Going back and looking at some of the other coaches that you had in Last Chance U, Buddy Stevens was just a classic football coach, in my opinion. He's a guy that's going to get up in your face and scream and yell at you if you make a mistake, which is like expected. Like every single coach that we've seen in Last Chance U has done that. There's nothing really much there. Jason Brown, I love the energy and the fire that he had to him. Like, it was when he got hyped up or whatever, especially after the upset win against Garden City in the first season at ICC, so that would have been season 3. Loved how, like, just the energy he brought after that game, but he had his moments. He had his moments at ICC where you're just like, what on earth is this guy doing? Like, and then later he goes out for saying something racially inappropriate. I don't want to say it on here, but he says something to, I think, a team manager, which ultimately leads to him resigning at ICC. And then you have John Beam. John Beam, I think that Laney season in total was very underrated. I wouldn't say that it was one of the better seasons, but I think for the credit people gave it, it was a really good season. John Beam was the guy that I really liked as well. The connections that he was able to build with the players and helping them and everything, especially, I think one thing that I really liked about him was he mentions that, like, in the whole California JUCO route, there's no scholarships, there's no meal plans, there's none of that when you go there. So one of the things that him and his wife did, I'm pretty sure, was like provide a meal for the whole team every single like Wednesday night or something like that, which was something that I thought was really cool. And I love seeing him build the relationship with players like Dior Walker-Scott. I think that was a really important one, and one that you just love to see. Every time he got on the screen, I feel like Dior was the guy who's like really the fan favorite of that season. But John Mosley, the connections he was able to make with the players. Yes, he was a fiery guy. You'd see him like get all up in the kids' faces, and he'd have his moments where he's running all up and down the gym. He'd have his moments where he's just walking around the gym, not saying a single word for like 5 minutes or something like that. But you just saw the passion and the love for the sport and the love for wanting to get these kids to the next place. Like, that's why they all went there, because he was promising them to get them to the next level if they came to ELAC. And I think it really showed just his care for the kids in the season, and it showed at the end of the season, which I'll get into later and what all happened. But first of all, John Mosley, an amazing coach and a guy that I really found myself rooting for like the whole show. Like I really, really, really like John Mosley and what he was able to do at ELAC, coming from a program that wasn't supposed to be anything. He is not getting paid all the most money. He mentions that multiple times in the series, but that's not, money doesn't mean anything to him. It's all about getting these kids to a point, giving them a chance, giving them a second chance when no one else will give them, which is why the show is called Last Chance U. Looking at some of the players, I think the connections to some of the players in the show were some of the best we've ever seen. I think Dior Walker-Scott was one of the best from the Laney series, of all the football series so far. You look at some of the other guys from the past seasons, I think Isaiah Wright was a big guy. Bobby Bruce on ICC was a big guy that I really loved watching and cheering for him. Malik Henry was kind of, you either love him or you hate him. Malik Henry on ICC. Who's the wide receiver on ICC? I can't remember, but there's some guys. There's lots of guys early on. DJ Law in the first season. Ronald Ali, definitely a guy that I love cheering for. Love Ronald Ali. So there was a bunch of guys to connect with and just really root for because they're just likable guys in all the other series. But the group of guys in this series and how they bonded and how they connected, I think you come out of that and you just really, really connect with all the players. Even though there's guys on that team who have been through things that I never even been close to coming through. I just think that they're a bunch of guys. They're just a bunch of likable guys and a bunch of guys who you find yourselves cheering for. First of all, I want to start off by talking about my favorite player, Joe Hampton. Again, like the series opens, I think like the first ever scene that they show in the whole series is Joe Hampton losing it in the locker room. I think that's the first episode. He just goes in, starts throwing stuff all over the locker room. But he's kind of the emotional leader of this team. Him and Deshaun Heiler, of course, I'm going to talk about him later. But Joe Hampton, coming from Penn State, being a top recruit, then just having issues there and coming down to East Los Angeles, not even being a starter. He's not even a starter because you have Malika Muhammad in front of him. He's just a guy that shows the fight and just shows the emotion, the real emotion of what it's like to go through these scenarios. And I really respect that because even though the cameras were there, he's just going to be himself. And I've found that in a bunch of the cutscenes where he's just talking about him stuff, you just find that he's being a real guy, like he's being himself. And I think he was a guy that, again, I just really, really found myself rooting for. And I had no problem saying that he was my favorite player in this whole East Los Angeles community college team. Joe Hampton was just a really likable guy. Not to mention that he was an absolute beast on the court and he was one of the better players on that team. KJ Allen was another guy that I really, really, really liked. Of course, he was kind of a quieter guy. He wasn't a guy that was going to be out on the court like wasn't your Joe Hampton or Deshaun Heiler, but he was kind of the best player on the team. He was the guy that got the most attention from big schools. He was the guy that was making all the big plays, all the massive dunks and everything. He was a guy that you he's a guy that's really humble, but a guy that you just can't hate, a guy that you're really, really going to like and enjoy the whole series. So KJ Allen, I think he was my second favorite guy. Deshaun Heiler, again, he's another guy that I really, really liked. He was the captain of that team. The leader on that team, him and Joe Hampton, I'd say were the two leaders. And just with the story and everything with his mom going through that and how he's gone through his whole basketball career and just the emotion and everything he brings to the court, he's kind of the guy that's really outspoken. He'll speak up or whatever. He's very verbal on the court and he's just a guy that wears his emotions on his sleeve, and you kind of just love watching that when things go his way on the court and the moment gets too big and then he makes a big shot or something like that. Deshaun Heiler is just another guy that you really find yourself rooting for. Malik Muhammad, another guy, I can name a bunch of guys on this team that I love rooting for, but he's another guy. He was a kind of quieter in the actual in-game situations and everything. In the practice court, you kind of saw him outspoken a bit more, but I think that all in all, he was another really good player. And then I think what I kind of like most about this basketball season is that with football teams, you have so many players on the team that it's hard to get to know everyone. I think everyone in that basketball team got their fair share of screen time, and they all got to kind of talk and have their own moments in front of the camera, because you have your main guys. Obviously Joe Hampton, Deshaun Heiler, KJ Allen, and Malik Muhammad were the four main guys in this season. But then you have guys like, I think Mark Bolin had some time on there, Ziegler, Regans, Copeland, all guys like that. Like, they had their fair amount of time on the screen, and you just get to know the guys that in the football season, there's just so many guys that you look on the screen and you'd be like, I haven't seen this guy all season, and all of a sudden he's just on the field. Like, you know everyone on the team when you're watching the whole season. So I think that was another thing that really fared well for the basketball team. The coaches for ELAC, the 2 assistant coaches, again, like guys that put a lot of heart and effort, and like they're not even getting paid at all. And I think Coach Rob said that he's not even getting paid at all to do this. Just the whole purpose and mission behind the coaches is to make these kids have a second chance. That's why it's called Last Chance U, but it's to get these kids to a place that they want to be. That is their mission, and I really, really enjoyed watching this season. So now going through kind of like the plot of the whole season. So starts out with ELAC. They're not a basketball powerhouse. It's kind of like ICC, where like they were never the powerhouse of their conference, but you kind of get them to this place. Like John Mosley comes in, he gets them to this place where they're starting to win, and they're finally going for a state championship. I don't think they don't show the initial loss. Like, ELAC has 1 loss all season, but they never show it. They only show the games that you win. One part about the season that got my heart pumping the whole time, whoever edited the documentary did an amazing job at making the games seem way closer than they were. Like, you think there were so many times when they're like in game days or in games that I thought that like they were losing by 7 points, and then they show the score on the screen and it's like ELAC's up by 5, and it's like, wait, what is it? You make it seem like with the music and everything, and you're only showing the bad highlights, that it's like ELAC's down by like 7 points and they're up by 5. Is that your heart's going to be pounding the whole series, I guarantee you that. So that's kind of the whole plot. The team has its moments. They're a group of guys that like each other, but they have their moments where just things happen in practice. Guys aren't going full speed, and guys get up in each other's faces, and there's just some tension sometimes, but they work through it. I think my favorite part of the whole series and my favorite coaching decision by John Mosley was the decision to take them to the ranch and just have a field trip day and have a day where you get to see these guys not as just basketball players, but you get to see them as human beings. I think that was one great part of the documentary, where you look at all the rest of them, like, where'd you really see these guys outside of football? The Laney one, you saw lots of DR Walker and like his whole journey and everything, but all the other players, you never really got to see them outside of playing football. And I think that bringing them to the ranch and having a day where you just get to like see the guys interact as like human beings outside of basketball, I think that was an amazing coaching decision, and that was a part that I really enjoyed. And it was really funny when they did the whole impersonations of John Mosley, and it just felt like this is a family. Like, this team is a family, and really, really great moment there. Then you move on. So they go undefeated throughout the season, except for that 1 loss, but basically all the games that they show, they go undefeated in. And then it gets to the playoff times where you go in and you have 2 close games, especially the last game. I think it was the super regional qualifiers or the regional finals, something like that. I can't remember the official name, but it was a really close game, and a game that they were down by a lot at half, and they had to come back. And just the emotional leadership of guys like Deshaun Heiler and Joe Hampton. You see him up on the bench all the time, getting up and clapping and cheering on his guys, and he was a guy that's just constantly going to be up and cheering for his guys. Again, another reason why Joe Hampton was my favorite player in that whole series. But that last game was so close, and the editing job was amazingly done, making it like seem like my heart was pounding the whole time during that last episode. It was crazy. And the episode's cut into 2 parts, because you have episode 7, which gets to like halftime or whatever, and then you have episode 8, which finishes off the rest of that game, so it leaves you on a cliffhanger. But that was an amazing game. They win that, and then they go to the final 4 teams or the final 8 teams, and that's when COVID hits, and the tournament ultimately gets canceled, and everything that they've worked hard for, like, that was their goal the whole season, is we're going to win state, we're going to win state, we're going to win state. And it was heartbreaking. Like, it was so heartbreaking when the tournament got canceled, and you just see John Mosley's face, just emotionless, a guy that's like has so much emotion the whole season, just go completely flat, because he knows that everything they worked for and everything he's done and everything the assistant coaches have done and all the hard work that those players have just put in all went for nothing. It was a really... That's what's holding me back from giving this whole documentary a 10. If they go on to win the state championship and the season continues as normal, I'd probably be looking at this as a 10 out of 10. I'm dead serious, but because it got cut short because of COVID, it wasn't their fault at all, but I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. This whole series was a solid 8 out of 10. The leadership was it was spot on. I feel like the players on this team are definitely guys that you all want to root for, and they have some amazing stories. The actual play, I found that Laney and the last season of ICC, the play wasn't that good. You saw they were expected to do great things at the beginning of the season, and then they just go on to have disappointing seasons. This was a really, really good basketball team. It was expected to go to states, but since COVID and everything screwed that over. But if the season would have finished out, it was a really bummer way to end the season. But again, it's not like they wanted it to end like that. It just happened because of COVID and everything. But if they would have went out and won state, this season would have been all-time great. It was unbelievable. But that's my review. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. If you haven't watched this yet, I highly, highly, highly recommend you go watch it because it was an amazing series. And I hope they bring it back. I hope they bring back ELAC again just for one more season. I know there's not going to be any Joe Hampton or Deshaun Heiler or Malik Muhammad because Joe Hampton went to Long Beach State. KJ Allen went to USC, so he was the guy who went to the biggest school out of all of them, and I think he's still a commit. He's going to be playing next season. Deshaun Heiler went to Sacramento State, and then you had Malik Muhammad going to Central Michigan. So the main four guys, they all went. And then you have some of the freshmen staying back there still on the team because they got to finish 2 years in JUCO. But that is my review, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, watch the show if you haven't. If you have, let me know your opinions on it in the comment section. Like the video, and thank you for watching, and come back next time.